Grade 4 Mid-Module 6 Review Test, numbers 4 and 5. Number 4 says, model the following equivalents on the place value chart using number disks. So when we look at this, 30 hundredths is equal to 3 tenths. We have a couple of ways we can prove it, which is what they're asking us to do, is to model it, to show that it's true. We can start with 3 tenths, right? And so I could draw 1, 2, 3 tenths. And what we would do is, I need to cross this one out and decompose it into hundredths. And then when we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them. Then I would come back over and cross out another of my tenths. And I would decompose it into hundredths. And so I'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then we would go back and cross out the last tenth and bring it over here and decompose it into hundredths. And I'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And when I count all of these up, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, we would see that 30 hundredths is exactly the same. Let me write it somewhere better, sorry. We would see that 30 hundredths, right, is the same as 3 tenths. You're just calling it different things. It's like having 3 dimes. The tenths would be like having 3 dimes, and the hundredths would be like having 30 pennies. You both have 30 cents. It's the same amount of money. And that's it for number 4. Let's look at number 5. So I'm not even sure I'm going to be able to write small enough to do 5 very well, but I will give it a go. So 5 is really trying to find out if you know how to write any number in unit form, in fraction form, in fraction expanded form, in decimal expanded form, and in decimal. So I like to start down here with these two that seem to be a little bit harder than the others. Because if I can go from this and do each of the other things, then hopefully I'll be able to see how the other things create this. All right? So let's see if I can write small enough to do it. So if we have 4 times 10, that equals 40, okay? Plus 8 times 1 is 8. So already I see that I have the number 48. Then I have 2 times 1 tenth, which will be 2 tenths, plus 7 times 100th, which will be 7 hundredths. To add the fractions, I have to make sure that my denominators are the same, which they are not. I have 100 here and 10 here. But if I multiply times 10 over 10, I could get 100 here with a 20 on top. And that's going to give me my fraction, which is 48 and 27 hundredths. 48 and 27 hundredths in decimal form is going to be 48.27. In unit form, and I look up here at the example to really help me, all right? So I have, what do I have in the tens column? I have 4 tens. So I write 4 tens. Then I have an 8 in the ones column. What's my next column? Maybe it's easier to see if I look over here. The next column would be 2 tenths. And then that last column will be 7 and then hundredths. Make sure you get that THS on the end of hundredths. Oh, and the D in there. Sorry for the writing. So then the last one I have to do is the decimal expanded form. The decimal expanded form is the same as the fraction expanded form for your tens column and your ones column. So I'm going to start with that. I'm going to get 4 times 10 plus 8 times 1. Because for our ones column and our tens column, that doesn't change whether it's fractions or decimals because it's ones and tens. Then my next section right here where it says 2 times 1/10, I'm going to change that to 2 times 1/10 in decimal form. Then we add again. My last part here, I'm going to write 7 times, and then I need 1/100th, but in decimal form, which would be with the 1 in the hundredths place. And you do that for each problem, all right? I'm going to go to the center because eventually I'm going to erase that, otherwise it's going to get crazy. So actually, if you want to copy this or look at it harder, you should pause maybe. Oh, I don't know. Let's see how messy it gets. So let's look at D. So I'm looking at D, and I have 3 times 10, which is 30. 4 times 1, which is 4. So already I know that I have 34 for this section or 34 for this section. Plus 8 times 1/100th. Okay, well 8 times 1 is going to be 8, and it's going to be in the hundredths column, right? Because that would be 0.08. So in the decimal, I have 34 and 8/100ths. In the fraction column, I'm going to have 8/100ths because it's going to be in a fraction. In the unit form, I just look at each column like I did before. In the tens column, I have 3, so I write 3 tens. In the ones column, I have 4, so I write 4 ones. In the tenths column, I have nothing. I have a 0, so I write nothing. And then in the hundredths column, I have an 8, so I write 8/100ths. All right? Now for this center part, for the fraction expanded form, again, for the tens and the ones column, it's going to look just like it does in decimal form. So then we have 3 times 10 plus 4 times 1 plus, and then we have to write this part, but in a fraction form. So 8 times, and then how do I write 1/100th in a fraction? Well, you write it 1/100th. And that's what you do for D. All right. Now I don't have either one of the hard ones done for C. So I'm going to start with 4.25. And let's go ahead and jump over to the fraction part. And we'll do 4 and then 25. What would that fraction be over? Well, the 5 is in the hundredths column, so it's going to be 4 and 25/100ths. In unit form, that is 4 ones. 2, what column is the 2 in? The 2 is in the tenths column, so I write tenths. And then we have a 5. What column is the 5 in? It's in the hundredths column, so I write hundredths. The best I can, right? Now we're left with the part where we have the parentheses. So the ones are going to be the same in both of them. So I'm going to write parentheses 4 times 1 plus, and I'm going to do that in the other one also, parentheses 4 times 1 plus. Then I've got to deal with the 2, right? So I'm going to go plus parentheses 2 times. In the fraction, you have to know that 25 hundredths as a fraction can be decomposed into 2/10 and 5 hundredths. So I'm going to do 2 times 1/10 in my fraction expanded form plus 5 times 1/100th in my fraction expanded form. Whereas over here, you need to know that 4.25 can be decomposed as 4 and then 2/10 and then 5 hundredths. So in my expanded form here, my next parenthesis is going to be 2 times and then my tenths plus parentheses 5 times, and then that would be hundredths, like that. This will be a really good place to pause because I'm going to erase everything to do A and B. Hopefully I'm going to erase everything. There it is. Delete. Good enough. All right. Now let's look at 1 and 4/10. So my unit form is going to be 1, 1, and 4/10. When we write that in decimal form, it's going to be 1.4 because that 4 is in the tenths place. Now, to write it in fraction expanded form, let's start with 1 times 1 plus 4 times, what fraction is the unit form for tenths? That's right, it would be 1/10. That's it for that one. Decimal expanded form is going to be 1 times 1 plus, and then we need parentheses 4 times, and then how do I write tenths in decimal form? That's right, 0.1. So now I have 1 whole and 4/10. That's what you need for that one. All right, let's do A, our last one. 1/10 and 4 hundredths. Ooh, so this one doesn't have any holes. 1/10 and 4 hundredths. If you like decimal form best, then you would draw your 0 ones, a decimal, and then I have 1 in the tenths place and 4 in the hundredths place. If you like fraction form best, then you would combine the 1/10 and 4 hundredths to make 14 hundredths. Fraction expanded form, we have 1 times and then a tenth, which would be 1/10, plus 4 times, and then I need hundredths in a unit fraction, which would be 1/100ths. Then the last one we have will be 1 times. Now I need 1/10, but in a decimal form, so 0.1 plus parentheses, and then 4 times, and now I need this 100th in a decimal, which is 0.01, and our ending parentheses. Good job. Pause it if you need it. This one's got a lot of steps, so try to find a way to make each part make sense. Good job.